Hello everyone, my name is Juliana and welcome to What's Your Problem? A series where we spotlight students and alumni tackling real-world challenges with creativity, sustainability, and entrepreneurship. In each episode, we'll dive into the journey that they're currently taking, the ways they're trying to solve the challenge, and how NC State's resources help them turn these challenges into opportunities. Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm your host, Juliana, and today I welcome you.
Collin, I'm the founder of Open Door Engineering.
Awesome. And Collin, tell me, what's your problem? What is the challenge or gap that you found in the field that made you want to take action?
So my problem was with outreach. I did outreach with schools before, specifically like K-12 outreach, and I found that a lot of the outreach wasn't effective enough in bringing enough diverse backgrounds. Obviously, different departments have different amounts of funding, and so that would mean like let's say the electrical engineering department, they'll do a ton of outreach. But the problem is it's just electrical engineers. So I found that when I was on these visits, that a lot of kids would see the electrical engineers and be like, "That's not for me," but they would immediately jump to the conclusion that all of engineering isn't for them. And so that's when I realized that I wanted to really bring different students from different majors together to really address that problem. And I also found there was a huge need for outreach that wasn't really being addressed. And a lot of that was also the hands-on activities. A lot of the activities that people were doing for outreach were kind of reused and they felt stale. And I felt that the kids weren't engaged enough. There were so many cool projects that I was personally doing or my classmates were doing that I was like, if a kid saw this would be so cool. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do out of high school. And I feel like a lot of people don't either, where just exposing those types of fields to them was something that I was like, okay, this is a big problem and I wanted to solve it.
How does your work address the challenge that you said was presented, and what makes it stand out?
So one of the things that I wanted to do, like from the core up, was to really design the game, like all the activities to be gamified and hands-on. Because we knew like when we were going to these classrooms, let's say like 15 to 30 students, that not all of them would be super engaged. Not all of them would be like, hey, that's for me. And so for all the students who weren't like that, we wanted to still make something fun and competitive for them. And so that was kind of something that as we were developing the workshops that we focused entirely. And another thing that we wanted to address the problem with was a diverse group of volunteers. And so that's something that as we got the workshop requests and was seeing what schools were wanting, that we recruited heavily from college design, which was something that we didn't even really think about when we first started. The name Open Door Engineering, we were like, okay, we'll just bring engineers to classrooms. But we realized that we wanted a diverse group, and that includes also design students. So I went to the faculty of college design and was like, hey, I just honestly need your students. And they were super helpful. And we got a ton of architecture, landscape architecture, design students to help us out. And then we started focusing on getting all the other majors surrounding. So like agricultural engineering, stuff like that, where we're like, okay, let's get the like surrounding majors first, and then we'll like worry about core groups of volunteers. And now that way that each of our visits, we could kind of arrange like 3 different people from 3 different backgrounds. So at each of these schools, they would be able to ask questions to different people. And every activity we would be able to present, we could be like, hey, that activity, that's what I do in the field, but a different perspective than even the volunteer next to me. We didn't want to have the same 2 engineers at every single visit. We didn't want to have the same like discipline or major at each visit. And so that's something that even coordinating with the teachers, that we were like, we wanted a good group of people that like would represent the field diversely enough to address that problem.
Yes, and to kind of go more in depth in that, how vital do you see this cross collaboration between the different majors or engineers in pursuit of the end goal of open door engineering?
I think it's super vital. I mean, honestly, even on the volunteer side, I think it's vital for engineers to have other like work with other disciplines and hear their different experiences. But for a student, I think it's even more vital because every single thing we do in the real world requires people from different backgrounds, and them being able to see that and see something that they're being taught in school from all these different perspectives is something that's super big. We had a visit last week where we were bringing in the design process, something that the kids were learning for almost years at this point. But we brought in 3 entirely different use cases of the design process. I was there and I brought in like more of because I work as a program manager. And so I brought in like more of the product design side of that. But the other volunteer was landscape architecture. That was like a super, kind of like, okay, how are we designing this landscape? And that's more artistic. And then the other one was more of like a traditional architect, where like all 3 of us had completely different stuff to say about the design process. And like for the students hearing about that, it made this like kind of single faced like topic show how much more depth in it, because all these things that the teachers in our county are trying to teach the students, they're used in a lot of different ways and they're super crucial, but it's kind of hard to convey that in like a classroom setting without bringing in those different perspectives.
What resources, experiences, and partnerships have been most important in helping bring this idea to life?
I would say, like, first of all, NC State was extremely crucial for us just because we were starting at NC State. And the
Mm-hmm.
one thing we needed was, like, okay, we need different STEM majors. And NC State is a very heavy STEM school
STEM.
where being able to find those students was incredibly easy. The faculty helping us was something that was super crucial to us. We would talk to faculty and they'd be like, I know these students, like, you should go talk to them, or they'd send the newsletter out, or they'd send it out to their class. And so getting our volunteer base was super helpful with NC State, but like kind of how we were running it was from our different own experiences. And I have a lot of
Mm.
experiences like building things and designing products where being able to iterate super fast and accept feedback was something that was really crucial, because almost it felt like every day we would have to pivot. We Something that
Mm.
we would intend for a workshop would go completely haywire. We had this whole workshop planned for last week, and the
Uh-huh.
night before I got a text from the teacher saying that the website wasn't blocked the day before, was blocked for the students the day after. And so within like 4 hours, I had to redesign the entire thing, or
Oh
else we couldn't
no.
do the visit. And being able to like understand that problems come up and that like you have to pivot is something that
Mm-hmm.
was super crucial, even for a nonprofit, which was something I didn't really expect. And that's the way me and the other founders have been kind of running it. Is that like it is a startup of sorts, and
Mm-hmm.
so we were kind of running it with an entirely startup mentality. And so all the resources, even here at NC State, like entrepreneurship, like just being able to like bounce ideas off of people, getting feedback, setting meetings, and being like, hey, what do you think about this? We knew that like when we started this, we weren't sure what it was going to look like, what problems we'd run into, like what directions we want to shape it into. And we knew that that was going to get shaped by feedback, whether it was from the teachers or whether it was from students or whether it was from like key faculty here.
What lessons have you or the team learned throughout your journey, and what would you like to share with others about it?
So one of the most important things that I learned during this was like when you have something that people obviously want, which for us it was super easy because it's like it's free and we're doing good for people.
Fostering education.
Yeah, it's like who's gonna say no to that? But when you have something that like people really want, to kind of even broaden this out of a nonprofit stuff, like just go for it. Like you want to run it until it breaks. And we ran into other organizations that were doing similar stuff to us, but they were going super slow. They were playing it safe.
Mm.
They weren't taking risks. And for us, we were like, we knew that like teachers would want this. So we were like, send it out to every teacher when we made that connection. We were like, just schedule all the workshops. Like we'll figure it out, which is definitely risky to a point,
Mhm.
but it made sure that there was problems coming up, that we were always moving as fast as we could. Just because like momentum with something like this really grows and it starts to snowball. And I think that's something that people can take away with really anything else in their life, is that like when you get something going, like just try to move it as fast as possible, because you're not going to really know what it's going to look like. You're not going to know what the next opportunity is or what the next problem is. And so putting it in a position where you're just fixing things, I think is a lot better than having to create things, because we had the idea, but to kind of execute it, we were like, okay, just put this out there. Like, just get people doing it. Let's actually just do the visits. Let's get the teacher scheduled and we'll see what's wrong. And then we were like, okay, that's wrong. Let's fix it. Okay, now this thing's wrong. And then slowly we kind of ended up somewhere that we didn't really think we would be a month ago. I mean, even talking to other students, they're like a month. And we're like, yeah, we just kind of been like breaking it as much as possible. We just want to
Mm.
break everything about it. And that's kind of back to why we're doing this too. It's because we see this problem, but we see the same cycle over and over again. And we're like, we just want to break the entire cycle. And it's
Mhm.
like, just get something that people want and then just put it out there and just do as much as you can to keep it going.
And what would you say was a risk Open Door Engineering took that these other competitors didn't? I know you said lots of outreach and being fast, but was there anything else?
I would say the biggest risk is scheduling out the workshops, because these workshops are
Okay.
like kind of intimidating. You have 70 fifth graders. Like we did a workshop with like 70 fifth graders, and like we scheduled it out and our activity wasn't really even finished until like the night before. And it's like we were set up to probably fail on that, but
Oh.
like we were like, okay, we can figure it out. Like we knew I was trusted the team enough and I knew that
Mhm.
we had it in us to figure it out in a short time span, or else I wouldn't have taken that risk. I'm like, it's not like some risks, like obviously if you
You're
can't
not going
do
in
it,
blind.
yeah, like you're not going in blind. But like with this case, it was like, okay, I feel confident enough that like I'm able to figure it out. But like that workshop could have gone really bad, but it went incredible. And part of the reason it went incredible was because we did pivot around what the teacher was saying and like our gut instinct. Because we had two workshops, one Thursday, one Friday, and up until the last day, we had two different activities planned for them. We swapped them last second because we were like, it doesn't really make sense for this class to do this activity versus this. Because one of the main problems that I didn't really think about was like, how do you know where the students you're talking to are at? Like whether they're talking about like an understanding level, how complex or how simple do you make an activity? All this stuff that like I didn't really account for started coming up where it's like you can either make it really complicated, but then it's really hard to understand in a short time frame. They don't really get a lot from it. Or you make it too simple where it's like, oh, this is boring. And so we had to find that balance, but that really depends on every single classroom. And we got the balance wrong with those two classrooms up until the last day. And we were like, no, switch it. And switching it was like the best thing we could have done in that scenario. And it was just so last second, but it worked out.
And the final question of today's video is, what futuristic impact do you hope to make with open door engineering in the next year?
So even within the next year, our broader mission is to open source engineering across the country. I mean, open source engineering outreach and STEM outreach. Because one of the main problems that we found was honestly the income gap, because a lot of schools have to pay for outreach. And that was something I didn't know until I started talking to more faculty and more people in it. But a lot of these people going out to these school visits are charging for them. And listen, I get it, but also that means that like some schools just can't afford those visits, or they don't have really eager college students in the area to go visit them. And so our broader mission and where we're working towards, like even within a year, is at each workshop we're doing, each visit we're doing, we're building an activity around that and like battle testing it with the students. And so our goal is to kind of fine tune these activities and then eventually like get them open source and hosted across the country where we have curriculum supporting that, where any school anywhere the teacher can just have all the resources to just go and do that activity with the kids, that we don't need specifically to be there to facilitate that, just to kind of augment the outreach process in a way that's more accessible. Because those situations where the school can't afford that, those students don't have that exposure to STEM. And even like one STEM exposure moment is super crucial, where just exposing to them in a way that like doesn't care about where the school is at or what resources they have is something that's really important to us. And where we see on like a 1 to 2 year time span is eventually getting those activities fully hosted in a way that's accessible to everybody.
Incredible. Thanks so much for watching this episode of What's Your Problem, where NC State innovators turn challenges into impact. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channels to see more students' stories. Want to share your own problem or project? Learn more about NC State's innovation and entrepreneurship programs on our website at ssie.entrepreneurship.ncsu.edu. Until next time, keep asking yourself, what's your problem?